Okay, today's daf is daf Pei Aleph. We're going to begin on Pei Omud Sheni, and we're going to begin one to about like 12 lines, 11 lines from the bottom of the page. Okay. Okay. The Mishnah in the Gemara we learned that there are two shiurim, right? For food, eating food on Yom Kippur, the shiur is like a date. Drinking, it's a malay lugmaf, right? Drinking a malay lugmaf, which is a cheekful. Okay, that's just to remember. So to eat foods, you need to eat the size of a date. So the Gemara says, Amar Rapapa said, Achol umza. Let's say a person ate a raw piece of meat. We've seen this before, that in the Talmud times they would eat raw meat, like in Japan they eat a lot of raw eggs. In Talmud time they ate raw meat, umilcha, and with the salt, and therefore in combination of the salt on top of the raw meat, you get a date size. So if you ate that on Yom Kippur, mitzvah, if they combined for the shear, so you'll be liable. Even though salt is not an edible food, but along with the meat, it becomes like a one piece of food. Even though salt is not really considered as food, since people eat it this way, they combine for the shear. Next Gemara. Amar Rish Lakish says another comment. Tzir shal gabe yorak, you have fish brine on top of vegetables. Let's say it's we'll call it in our dressing on top of a vegetable. So again, even though you won't eat dressing by itself, but mitzvah l'keksevis, it combines for that shear of a date b'yom kippurim on Yom Kippur. So Gemara says pshita. I think that's that's pretty simple. People eat vegetables with this dressing. So Gemara says mahu the same. I would have thought the dressing, which is like a liquid brine, mashkahu, that's considered liquid. And now we learned in our Mishnah that liquid and food, solids, don't combine for the shear. Kamash malan, once you use this liquid for a solid food, once you use this liquid for the vegetable, the dressing, it becomes like the food. Kol achshure uchla uchlahu. Anything that prepares food to be eaten, that's considered food. So that says the Gemara is this way. Then the Gemara says, Amar Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish said, if someone eats, let's say, as Rashi explains, he became to shul Yom Kippur by Kol Nidre, and he stuffed to the nines. So he can't put another morsel of food. If he wouldn't taste it. In other words, he wouldn't enjoy it. So if someone eats an achila gasa, a stuffed type of eating, b'Yom Kippurim on Yom Kippur, and this can only happen on Yom Kippur Kol Nidre. Can't happen in the morning, because as soon as you eat, you're ready fasting, you're ready chayav. So he eats achila gasa on Yom Kippur, potter. He's potter. My timer, asher loy su'uneh. The Torah says, whoever doesn't stress himself out, right, by not eating, gets kares. So this person, he doesn't really enjoy the food. So he's not unstressing himself, so to speak. So this said, prat lamazik, he's damaging himself. He's damaging the food and himself, because by eating something that he has absolutely no enjoyment, he's stretching his stomach, he could cause physical damage. But besides that, he's not enjoying it. And therefore, on Yom Kippur, you're potter. This same idea would apply another din. Amar Yirmiyah, Amar Shlakish. Right? Yirmiyah said in the name of Shlakish, Zor, a non-Kohen, she'achal truma, that ate truma achila gasa, again, a stuffed type of eating. Now we know a person who eats truma, a Yisrael that eats truma, he has to pay the Kohen back the principal, plus he has to pay 20% more. So if the person, the non-Kohen, the Yisrael who ate truma and achila gasa, a stuffed type of eating, so therefore, of course, mishalem is a keren. He has to pay the principal back to the kohen because he's stealing the kohen's money. The eina mishalem is a chomish, but you don't have to pay the 20% fine above and beyond. Why? Because the Torah, when it describes the fine that you pay for eating truma, it says ki yoicha. You have to have enjoyed the food. Prat lamazik, for somebody who does not enjoy the food, in fact, damages the truma. So therefore, he's not liable for that 20%, for that chaimish. Nu Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yirmiyah said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Zar, a non-kohen. We go to Pei Aleph, Amar Aleph. Shekoises so'irim shel truma. He was chewing on barley of truma. So people chew on wheat, but they don't chew on barley. It's something that's not such it's not eating. It's most likely like animal food. So Mishalim is a Karen, you pay the principal back to the kohen. Mishalim is chomish, but you don't pay the 20%. Why? Kiyoichel. The Torah says kiyoichel prat lamazik. If you're just damaging, you're not enjoying the food, you're just damaging the food. So then you don't pay the 20%. When do you pay the 20%? Let's say you eat an apple that belonged to the kohen. So you're enjoying while you're destroying the apple. Then you pay the 20%. But if you're just destroying the kohen's property by eating his raw barley, then you don't have to pay the 20%. So the Gemara, Omer of Shezbi, Omer of Yochanan. Here's another Rabbi Yochanan said a similar idea, but very interesting. Zar, a non-kain, shabola shazafin shel truma. He swallowed plums of truma, a plum. Now he swallowed it, so the hekiyun, and then he regurgitated it. He brought it up. So now you have a whole plum that was in somebody's stomach and it was just brought back up. And the second guy ate it. So the Rishon, the first person who swallowed it, so he was the one that stole from the kohen a nice looking plum. So he mishalim is a keren. He pays the principal to the kohen, the chomish and the 20% more. But now that he basically is paying for what he stole from the kohen, this plum was his plum. So therefore, when he regurgitated it, the next person that ate it is actually stealing from the czar. So therefore, but he's not stealing an edible plum. He's really stealing something that's totally non-edible. So Sheni, Eina Mishalim, he doesn't pay Eladam Eitzim to the use of being able to use this plum as firewood, because that's probably, since it's an unedible food, so it's probably the only use would have been as fuel for a fire. Lorisha Belvad, but he only pays it to the non-kohen, to the czar, because the czar already bought it by eating it first, so it's as if it was his. So the Sheni stole it from the first one. The Mishnah said, we said that the shear of eating, which is a date, and the shear of drinking, which is one cheekful, they don't combine. What does that mean? If a person ate, let's say, a half a date, and he drank a half a cheekful, so then you don't say he's chayev, you don't combine it, and therefore he's pater on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, Man Tana, who is this author of our Mishnah? Rav Chizda says, on this known argument, and it's not the Rabbanan, it's Rabbi Yeshua. It's Rabbi Yeshua. What Rabbi Yeshua are we talking about? The Tanah we learned in the Mishnah. Now, to understand this is that you are aware that there are three types of tumah. Let's say a sheretz. A sheretz would, let's say, a dead lizard. All right, and so touching a dead lizard, you become tummy for a day, right? But what's the size of the lizard you have to touch? An adasha, a lentil, the size of a lentil of that lizard, the dead lizard, you become tummy. Touching a nevela is another type of tumah. Nevela is an edible food that, let's say you go to Stop and Shop and you touch some of the meat, that's the treifa meat, the person can become tummy as long as you pick up a kazayas. So there, the size is different, but the tumah is the same. Both, if you touch a nevela, or kazayas of a nevela, or a lentil of a sheretz, you become tummy for a day. So, but they have different sizes to bimtami you. Then there's the third type of tumah. Let's call it mace. The dead body. All you have to do is touch a kazayas of the dead body, and you become tummy not for just a day. You become tummy for 7 days. Okay. So now let's see what Rabbi Yeshua says. Klal Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says, Kol shetumasa v'shiurei shava mitzdaref. That means the two things you touch two types of shrutzim. You become tummy. A half a lentil of one and a half a lentil of another. They combine for tumah because the size is the same and the type of tumah is the same. They're both the same tumah. You're tummy for a day. Let's say tumah is the same. The tumah is the same. For example, you touch an avela, a half a kazayas of an avela, and a half a lentil of a sheretz. So because the tumas is the same, the loy shiur, but the shiur is not the same, it's not going to combine. This is going to be not going to combine. Shiur v'loy tumasei. Let's say the size is the same, but the tumah is not the same. For example, a nevela with a mace. nevela and mace both have the shiur to mitama you a kazayas, but a nevela mitamas you only for a day, and a mace mitamas you for 7 days. So if you touch a half a zayas of each, or loy tumasib loy shurei, if they don't have nothing in common, they have no common denominator or numerator, nothing, not the tuma, not the shiur, ein mitzdarfen. It's not mitzdaref. So we see that Rabbi Yeshua says that once something is different in between something else, it doesn't combine to make you liable. So Rabbi Yeshua would be the one that say that if you eat a half a kazayas on Yom Kippur and you drink a half a cheekful, they don't combine to make you liable. But the Rabbanan would say they would make you liable. So our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yeshua. So says Rav Chizda. This was Rav Chizda who said that. Comes along Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman disagrees. He says, "Afilu temer Rabbanan." You can even say our Mishnah goes according to Rabbanan. Adkan, that means that you would combine by Tumah, you would combine things together, and that you would become Tameh. Because Adkan leKa'amri Rabbanan Hasam Eli in Tumah the Shem Tumah Chadhi. The Rabbanan say over there by Tumah, since the denominator of all these things, whether Kazayas, a Nevela, Mace, or Sheretz, they all, although the numerator is different, but the denominator is the same. They both are all being metamayu, whether for a day or a week. So therefore, they can combine if you only touch a half of a shear of each one of them. So they have some similarity, something that draws them together. By the case of food and drink, so you can never combine. Why? Because what's the whole point of being liable on Yom Kippur is settling your mind. So mishum yatoy vedatihi. The whole point of Yom Kippur to become liable for eating and drinking of Kippur is to settle your mind. Bahai, in this case, if you only eat a half a zayas of food and a half a cheekful of drink, loy miyat vedaite, your mind is not settled. So our Mishnah could go according to everybody. The Rosh Lakish said the exact same thing. The machlekes shnuya, he thought it's the machlekes between that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yeshua. The Tanan Klal Rabbi Yeshua. That's what Rabbi Shlokish said. But Rabbi Yochanan said this exact same thing. Rabbi Yochanan said exactly what Rav Nachman said. I feel the Tamer Rabbanan. Our Mishnah could come out according to Rabbanan. The Rabbanan only say that you combine things together by Tuma because they all have the same denominator. But over here, the whole point of Yom Kippur is to settle your mind. So if you eat a half a date of food and a half a cheekful of Malay Lugmav, high, in that case, your mind will not be settled, and therefore you would not be liable for eating on Yom Kippur and drinking on Yom Kippur. Next, Mishnah says, the Mishnah begins, we know that if someone was Mechal Shabbos and totally forgot it was Shabbos, even if he did all 39 malachos, he only brings one carbon. So if a guy ate and drank on Yom Kippur and forgot that it was Yom Kippur, because he did one avera of not putting himself in stress on Yom Kippur, so therefore he would only bring one carbon chatas. But let's say he ate on Yom Kippur and he did another avera, and he went to work on Yom Kippur. So these are two different averas. So he's chayav two sin offerings because he did two different averas. Now the Mishnah continues with another idea. You ate food that's not edible. And you drank a drink that's not edible, not something that you normally drink. I think what the Mishnah is going to say, for example, you drink fish brine, right? Or rice, or not the juice of the fish, but if you pickle fish like the herring juice, right? Herring juice, where you're drinking the liquid of that, then you're potter, because those type of things, although you could drink a little bit, they're not meant to be drunk as a drink, and therefore you will not be liable. Now comes along the Gemara, and let's just do what the psukim here. Let's take a look at this over here. In the Chumash, the Torah tells you about Yom Kippur. He says on the 10th day of the 7th month is Yom Kippurim. I want to call your attention. The Torah says, "V'inisem es nafshesechem." Put yourself at stress. Notice this pasuk. V'inisem es nafshesechem. Put yourself at stress. And then the Torah says, all work should not be done be'etzem hayom zeh, on the main day of Yom Kippur. Don't do any work. It's Yom Kippur. to bring you forgiveness. Then the Torah says, if anybody who does not do put himself in stress on Yom Kippur, on the main day of Yom Kippur, he gets chorus. And then the Torah says, any person that does work on Etzem Hayom Kippur, I should really highlight that because it says Etzem again. So on the main day of Yom Kippur, he does work. And there, it doesn't say chorus, but it means chorus. Going to make that soul lost from the Jewish people. Okay, so let's stop right here. Notice this pasuk over here. When the Torah tells you that you're supposed to not eat on Yom Kippur, it says it in like you're supposed to do something on Yom Kippur. Make yourself at stress. So the Gemara is wondering on the language of the Chumash. If you want to tell me not to do something on Yom Kippur, like not doing work, like it says, don't do work. So why didn't the Torah tell you don't eat on Yom Kippur? How about that? Or something like that. It tells you you should put yourself at stress, which is a positive way of saying it. But usually we're dealing here with negative commandments because the only way you can get punished for something of chorus has to be through a negative commandment. So the Gemara wonders why the language of the Chumash is in a positive way. So let's read. Amar Shlaka says, why did the Torah write a language of not to do something when it comes to the story of Inui, which means putting yourself at stress, not eating? So the Gemara interestingly says, defends the Torah. It's impossible to write it any other way. What do you mean? What should it be written in the Torah? Should the Torah write, don't eat on Yom Kippur? If the Torah wrote lo yochel, then that wouldn't be fair, because achila b'kazayis, the Torah would have implied that you shouldn't eat even an olive. We know that in Yom Kippur you could eat an olive. The shear is a date, not an olive. So the Torah could not write, do not eat. If the Torah wrote, don't put yourself in stress, so that would imply get up and go eat. So therefore, the Torah had no way of writing it. So Maskiv law, there's three questions over here. Maskiv of Rabbi Shaya. Rabbi Shaya asked the question. Nichtev rachamona hishomer pen lois una. Look at this. The Torah should say, be careful, and the word hishomer always implies a negative. That means like a shomer beneget tzoras or something like that, right? Or that means don't do something. Hishomer, be careful not to put yourself at stress on Yom Kippur. That could have been a negative way of saying that. So the Gemara says, if the Torah wrote it, Hishama pen loy suuna in kain afishahu lave. There's plenty of lav in that way. Hishama is one lav pen. The Torah only wanted to make you have one negative commandment, and by writing it that way, the Torah is giving you two negative commandments. Hishama is one pen. Maybe you're going to do something. So Maskiv law, Rav Beba Barabayas, Rav Beba Bar asked a question. Nichtoiv rachamona hishamar b'mitzvah inui. That the Torah write, be careful regarding the mitzvah of inui, because hishamer, be careful, always implies something negative. And the Torah is saying, be careful regarding the mitzvah of putting yourself at stress. So that would make it in a negative way. So the Gemara says, in Cain, that's not true, because hishamer is not a given automatically a negative statement. It depends on the context. If it's next to a negative statement, it says, Hishamer, don't do something, right? Hishamer lechem, can you do this? Then you can say that it's a negative connotation. But here, if you're putting the word Hishamer next to a positive statement, it becomes a positive statement. So this word Hishamer is like a neutral word. In Cain, no, because we know Hishamer the lav, if you put the word Hishamer next to a negative statement, lav, it's a negative statement. But he put the word hishamer, the asay, if you put it in next to a positive statement, asay, then it becomes a positive statement. So that's not the way the Torah should have written it. Maskiv lo Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi asked the question, Nichtev al tosir min ho'inoi. The Torah could have written, be careful, don't stray from putting yourself at stress. How about that? Don't stray from putting yourself at stress. So that would imply a negative way. So kasha, that's a difficulty, but let's leave it at that. Okay. So now there are two things over here. Okay, so now there are two things over here. Once we saw that the Chumash did not put it at the Chumash said it in a positive way, we have a big problem over here. What's the problem? You want to give a person kares if he eats on Yom Kippur, then the Torah should tell it to you in a negative way. We have to have a way that the Torah tells you something in a negative way in order for you to bring a chatos, in order for you to be punished by kares if you do it amazing. For example, you can't marry a sister. You can't do znus with one of the arayas. So the Torah says, don't do it. And if you do it, you get kares, right? So if you do it, you get kares. So that's a negative way, and therefore you can give a punishment. But by the Torah writing, but the inisim estafsha sheichem, we have a problem because how could you give kares and how could you chayiv a korban chatas if it's not written in a negative way? So that's why Vitana Maisi Lamahocha, the Tana a brisa solved that problem from over here. There's a brisa that says like this, and this is going to be the source, a very interesting source of where it says alav by inui. We'll call that inui, mean not eating on Yom Kippur. And the Gemara is going to come to the conclusion that it really does not say, it doesn't say you should alav by inui, but since it says by malacha, loisase malacha, so we can apply that just like malacha has a loisase, a negative statement. So we say as if Yom Kippur also has a negative statement regarding the inui. And here the Brisa brings a pasuk. The Brisa is talking about, just established that there is a din on Yom Kippur. What's the din on Yom Kippur? That Yom Kippur doesn't start from nightfall, right, or twilight. It actually starts a few minutes before sunset, because that's called Toisvis Malacha and Toisvis Inui. This fast really has to start min ha-Torah from prior to sunset. Now, the Brisa now continues. This is like a middle of a Brisa. The Torah says, the Torah compares, you should put yourself at stress and not to do malacha. In that psukim, it says, don't do two things. So I would have thought, Yochel yehe oynish al toisvis malacha, toisefis malacha. I would have thought that there would have been a punishment if during the time of toisefis malacha, if you don't do malacha on, let's say you did malacha right before sunset, where you accepted Yom Kippur and then you did malacha, I would have thought that there would be kares over there. So that's the Brisa say that the Talmud Bavli, the pasuk says no. Only when do you get kares? If you don't do malacha on be'etzem, the main part of the day. But on the main part of the day, you get kares. You don't get kares from doing malacha before sunset. Oh, fine. Then the Brisa says, I said, okay, there's no kares if you do malacha before sunset. But I would have thought that what? Yehe onish kares al tosefes inui. I would have thought that there would have been kares on tosefes inui. Talmud Loima, because Talmud Loima kichol hanefesh ad loy suuna be'etzem hayoyim azev v'nichrasa al itzume shel yoyim onish kares vein onish kares at tosefes inui. So the Brisa explains that the Torah says you will, if you only time you get kares for eating on Yom Kippur is only if you eat on Yom Kippur proper, on the night of Yom Kippur, the day of Yom Kippur, but not the eating prior to Yom Kippur, which is called the Toisvus Yom Kippur. But prior to sunset, if you eat before then, you're not chayev kares. There's in lav, it's an aveira, but it's not something that you will get punished with kares. So the Gemara says, I might thought, okay, you don't get kares, but maybe you get malchus if you eat toisefes malacha. In other words, now the Gemara is going back to working before sunset. Okay, you just tell me that you don't get kares if you work before sunset, but maybe it's a lav, and a lav you get malchus. Another time the Torah says, whoever is not going to do malacha on this, you only get a lav on Yom Kippur proper, but you don't get a lav you don't get even a lav before sunset for doing work. Locha, the Brisa says, Lo yehe muzal tosefes malacha. You told me that, okay, there is no lav if you do malacha before sunset. But what happens, maybe, al yehe muzal al tosefes inui. Maybe you get a lav for eating before sunset. In other words, instead of getting karis if you eat before sunset, that we established you don't get karis, but maybe you get a lav and you would have to get malchus for that. So the Gemara answers, the Bryce answers, v'dinhu. It's a kal v'chomer. Uma malacha sheneheges b'shabbosos v'yom tov. Malacha applies is a universal concept. We find the isser to do malacha not only on Yom Kippur, but every Shabbos, every Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do work. Eina musar. There is no lav during the Tosfos, during this before sunset. We just established by malacha there is no lav during the Tosfos time, during the extended time before sunset. There is no lav by malacha. Inoi, so inoi, which is not as severe as malacha, inoi is less. Why is inoi less? Because there's no such a thing of fasting on Shabbos Yom Tov, so it's a less of an item. Certainly, that you should not get any malchus or lav. Fine. So the Brisa, up until this point, it just had one point. It told you that right up to this point, it told you that there's a concept of you have to take on Yom Kippur a little bit before sunset, but there is no lav, chorus, or anything if you do malacha or you eat before sunset. That's no malacha, nothing. Fine. And there's no chorus and no lav. Now is the main point of why we brought this price here. Again, we want to know, how could you ever give chorus on somebody who fasts, who somebody eats a Yom Kippur? The Torah did not say that. The Torah says, it did not say it in a negative way. That's what the Brisa concludes. We never learned about a lav of fasting a Yom Kippur. It didn't say it in a negative way. So how do you know? And therefore, you should not be punished for eating a Yom Kippur chorus, because the Torah never said it in a lav. So the Gemara says, no, we have a kal v'chomer. The Torah did not have to write that you get chorus if you work on Yom Kippur. The Torah did not have to write that. Why? The Gama Me'inu, because I would have learned it out for fasting. That if fasting you get chorus, then certainly if you work on Yom Kippur, you get chorus. Fasting on Yom Kippur, that's not, it doesn't, you don't have that concept on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Onish chorus, you get punishment by chorus. Malacha sheneheges b'sheyasa v'yom tovim. The malacha that applies by every Shabbos and Yom Tov, loy kol shekain. Certainly, you would get punished with chorus. So something is extra, redundant in this pasuk. What's redundant? The fact that the Torah says that if you do work on Yom Kippur, you get chorus. Why is it redundant? Because I could have learned it out from Inui. If Inui, which is just a one-time thing that applies only by Yom Kippur, you get chorus. So then certainly Shabbos and Yom Tov. So Lama Nemba, why did the Torah write that you have to get chorus on Yom Kippur? Mufna, it's an extra thing that the Torah didn't write. Lahakish v'lodem b'men gzeir shava, so that you can make a gzeir shava. Because Nema oynish b'inoi, the Torah says you get chorus when you by inoi. V'nema oynish b'malacha, and the Torah says you get chorus by doing malacha. Ma malacha, just by malacha, loy onish, the Torah doesn't give you a punishment of chorus elam kein hizer, only if it warned you. And by malacha, the Torah says loy sasa malacha, so it clearly says loy sasa malacha, and the Torah gives you chorus. So by inoi we'll apply it, even though it doesn't really say it. We'll say loy onish elam kein hizer. You will not get a punishment of chorus. Only we consider it as if the Torah warned you not to do it. That's what the Gemara just said. We consider it as if, because it's learned out by malacha. So what brought you to that? Because you said that inoi is less of a chidush than malacha. That's not true. So the Gemara says that whole limit is extra. It doesn't make sense, because Ikal Mifrach can answer back. Mali inu shloi hitam maklalai timer b'malacha shuter maklalai. Inoi applies on Yom Kippur for everybody. Nobody is exempt from fasting, so that's very strict. Malacha is permitted. Shuter maklalai. The rule gets bent for those that do the service in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's the Torah. I would have thought what.
What about the Mishaleach for the Azazel? Could eat, right? Even though he never does, but they offer him food.
Oh,
right?
They offer him.
Because that's also associated. Although he never actually ate, right?
Right, but
So,
that's not
but he
right.
could have eaten. But he could have eaten. So it's such a machlala.
That's a great question. Very good question. I got to look that up. That's an excellent question. Okay, but time of malach short maklala. So that could happen. So therefore, Ella says the Gemara again. What we're looking for is a source of how that you want to apply that because the Torah wrote a lav by not to do something by malacha, we'll say it is as if the Torah wrote not to do something by eating. So the Gemara says the conclusion of Rabbi is lo the Torah should not write a punishment by inui. That's totally extra. The Torah doesn't have to tell you get chorus by not fasting Yom Kippur. Why? The Gama Malacha. I would have learned it from work. Ma Malacha, work on Yom Kippur, you get chorus. Shehutra McClellan, that it's very light thing because malacha is not also for everybody. You see that in the base of English you could do malacha, and nevertheless the Torah said onush kares, you get kares. Inui shaloi hutim McClellan. Inui, which you do not, which can with there is no exceptions. Loi kalsh kain. Certainly you get kares. So why did the Torah at all write that you get kares by inui, by not eating on Yom Kippur? So the Gemara says Loma Nema. So it must be Mufne. This is a whole redundancy. Lahakish l'nodim b'demen gzeir shava. Nema to make a gzeir shava to say that Inui has the same status as malacha. Nema einish b'inui, it says you get kares by Inui. But nema einish b'malacha, it says you get kares by malacha on Yom Kippur. Ma malacha einish b'hizer. Just by malacha we know the Torah gives you kares, and the Torah explicitly wrote a negative commandment. Af Inui, so we'll consider that the Torah gives you an einish a kares. The hizer it actually gave you the negative commandment, although the Torah didn't write it. So finally, the Brisa ends off. That doesn't work either, because ikal you could ask the opposite way. What's your premise? Is that that malacha is less of a chiddush than inui? True. Malacha is more of a chiddush. Shekena haggis b'shabbasos v'yam. Therefore, it's much. Therefore, you get kares. Maybe I would have thought if the Torah did not tell you get kares by inui, I would have thought that you do not get kares by inui because that it's not noeg b'shabbos v'yam. So what we're holding over here is that the Gemara needs to find a source of where the Torah has a negative statement regarding fasting on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara is going to give you 4 terutzim, and that's it. Amar Ravina said, "Hi, Taina etzem gomer." It's a gzeir shava etzem by inui, and etzem by not eating on Yom, and not doing malacha on Yom Kippur. Mufna, and there must be one of those are extra. The Eloi mufna, if they're not extra, the ikal mifrach. You can't learn one from another because each one has a strictness and a leniency that the other one doesn't have. So the Gemara says, all these things is true. Afnuya mufne, it's one of them is extra, because the Gemara explains 5 times the Torah says don't do malach on Yom Kippur. Chad, one time is lazar diyamama, don't do work during the day. Chad la'azhara delayla, it's the one tells you not to work on the night of Yom Kippur. Chad la'oinish diyamama, one tells you you get kares if you work on the day of Yom Kippur. Chad la'oinish delayla, one tells you get oinish at night if you work on Yom Kippur. So, but that's 4, and the Torah says 5. Don't do work on Yom Kippur. What is totally redundant? Lemigmar inum and malacha, to teach you that inui should be learned from malacha. Bein dimama bein delayla, that just like malacha has a negative connotation and a punishment, inui, which has a kares, consider it as if it has also a negative statement, a lav. Now, the Bei Rabbi Shmuel gives another idea. Tana, he says, Nema kan inui. It says over here on Yom Kippur, don't, it says the word inui, right? The Nema lahalad, inui, it says by a naira hamarasa who gets raped, right? A girl who's engaged and not yet married, but engaged to somebody, and there's a naira, it says inui. Ma lahalan, just like over there, loy onish elam kain, the Torah is not giving you kares, a punishment, because only if there has a lav. So there is a lav over there. Don't do that. Afkan loy onish elam kain. So the inui that it says by Yom Kippur, consider it as if it wrote a negative statement on Yom Kippur, don't do something like that. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Omar, Rabbi Yaakov says the third way. Yalav Shabbos Shabbos. Torah says that Yom Kippur is Shabbos Shabbos, the double Shabbos. So we learn Yom Kippur b'Shabbos Bereshis. Yom Kippur from every regular Shabbos. Malahalan, just like on a regular Shabbos, like honest, you're not going to get skila, Elam Kain Hizer, until you have the lav. And therefore, by Shabbos, every Shabbos says don't do malacha. So Afkan, so also by Yom Kippur, where the Torah says don't, where the Torah says and he gets chorus, loy honest, the Torah is not giving you a chorus, Elam Kain Hizer, only if it gave you a lav. So consider it as if it wrote a lav by fasting on Yom Kippur. Rapapa Amar, we go to Amad Beis, who gufa Shabbos. By the way, I'm going to go like just 2-3 minutes over time because it was quite a longer daf, and just want to just get to the another part here. Who gufa Shabbos Ikri? This is also Yom Kippur is really called Shabbos. Yom Kippur is called Shabbos. B'tiksiv Tishbesu Shabbatchem. The Torah itself calls Yom Kippur Shabbos. So just like on Shabbos, there's always a law for the punishment. So everything that has to do with Yom Kippur, consider it as if there's a law for the punishment. So now, the Gebishlam Rapapa, who brought this last thing of Tishbesu Shabbatchem, that's a great drasha. There, it tells you, the Torah tells you that this is like a regular Shabbos. He did not say like Rav Yaakov bar Yaakov, who said that you learn it from Shabbos braces, from Shabbos Shabbosim, the Ksiv Begufei Adav. The Krod, the Ksiv Begufei Adav. This Tishbesu Shabbatchem is written by Yom Kippur, and it tells you it has a din like a regular Shabbos. Ella Rav Acha bar Yaakov, my time in Omek Rapapa. Why didn't he learn it like Rapapa? Why didn't he use the word Tishbesu Shabbatchem to teach you that Yom Kippur should be like a regular Shabbos? What did Rav Acha bar Yaakov do? Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, Rav Yaakov says Shabbos Shabbosai, that the Torah calls this Yom Kippur as Shabbos and a regular Shabbos is Shabbos. So you learn one from the other, but he doesn't learn it from Tishbesu Shabbatchem. That seems like the better choice. So the Gemara says, we need, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, the concept of Tishbesu Shabbatchem. I'm just bringing up the pasuk again. The Torah says, no one should do malacha. Again, like another time, don't do work on Yom Kippur. Then the Torah says, Shabbos Shabbosoin hu lachem. It's a Shabbos, a day of rest. And you should put yourself at stress. Now notice this pasuk. On the 9th of Tishrei, be'erev at night, be'erev ader, from night to night, tishbeshu Shabbatchem. You should rest your Shabbos. So what do you do? According to Rav Papa, Tishbeshu Shabbatchem teaches you that Yom Kippur is called a Shabbos. But according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Tishbeshu Shabbatchem teaches you something else. What does that teach you? So the Torah, we bring a brisa. The Torah says you should put yourself at stress on the 9th of Av. The Torah says put yourself at stress. Stop eating on the 9th of Av. I might have thought you should not eat on the 9th of Av. Talmud Loima, the Torah says bo erev. That means you only start at the night of Yom Kippur. Iba erev, if the Torah says at night, yochol mishetechshus, then I should say that you should start eating. You should stop eating only after when it comes dark outside. Talmud Loima B'tisha. The Torah says you should stop eating already when it's nighttime. Hoketzad maskal misana miboyod. You have to start and the fast while it's still before sunset. That's what we spoke about before. So here's the source of called Tosfos Yom Kippurim. From here you learn one is required to add a little bit to Yom Kippur from before the day. Only start of Yom Kippur. How do you know Yom Kippur cannot end as soon as sunset or as soon as twilight ends? You have to wait a little bit after Tzesach Kachavim. Talmud Loima be'erev ad erev. It's from night to night. That means the Torah says just like on the eve of Yom Kippur you add a little bit, so also post Yom Kippur you have to add a little moment or two. Yom Kippur. I only know that the concept of Mosif to add to the day is on Yom Kippur. Shabbos benayim. How do you know on Shabbos you're supposed to do the same thing? That's why we start Shabbos a little bit before sunset. Talmud Loima tishbesu. Do the same thing on Shabbos. Ainli ella Shabbos Yom Tov benayim. How do you know you're supposed to add a little bit to the Yom Tov? Talmud Loima Shabbatchem. So you see, Rab Acha bar Yaakov You, Rabbi Achba Yaakov, used the Tish B'Shu Shabbatchem to teach you that you're supposed to add not only on Yom Kippur, add a little bit to the day, but also Shabbos and also Yom Tiv. Every time that it says don't do something, you have to add to the from the weekday to the holy day. And this not only applies to Shabbos and Yom Tiv, but where else would it apply? It applies on Shemitah also. Shemitah has to start a little bit before this coming year's Shemitah. It has to start a little bit before of the Tishrei, before Rosh Hashanah. Because anytime we have an abstention, you have to add a little bit from the weekday to the holy day. The Tana asks one more question. According to a Tana, the Tana of the Brisa had a statement who said that from Etzem teaches you that he learned that there is no punishment and there is no lav and chorus if you eat during Tosfos Yom Kippurim. The fact that the Torah told you that must be that the Torah had an isser for that. So if the Torah had an isser that you're already not supposed to eat before Yom Kippur, so then you don't need Tish B'Shu Shabbatchem to teach you that Yom Kippur starts early. The fact that the Torah says you're not going to get punished with chorus, you're not going to get a malchus if you eat before Yom Kippur, before sunset, there must be a concept of not eating before sunset. So according to that Tana, what do you do with Tish B'Shu Shabbatchem? So Mebayale, he needs it. The Tani Rechia Bar Difta. You should remember this. The Tani Rechia Bar Difta. The Torah says you should put yourself in stress already on the 9th of Tishrei. Are you fasting on the 9th? You're fasting on the 10th. This teaches you that the Torah wanted you to eat. And the Torah is, you have to imagine that the Torah said that I don't want you to eat on the 9th and the 10th. But the Torah says if you're going to eat on the 9th, I'm going to consider it as if you ate on the 9th and the 10th. That the Torah says if you eat on the 9th and the 10th, if you eat on the 9th, I consider it, says Hashem, as if you fasted on the 9th and the 10th. So really, Hashem wanted to give us 2 days of fasting, but didn't want to make it so severe. So he said that if you eat on the 9th, the mitzvah is to eat on the 9th, and it could be a daraisa, I would consider it as if you fasted on the 9th and the 10th. Hence, that's why we have big mitzvahs to eat on the 9th of Tishrei. Could be that the Torah Hashem wanted you to have an easy fast, or just the opposite. You have a difficult fast because you ate so much before Yom Kippur. So on Yom Kippur, there's it's like a withdrawal. So maybe that's more of an inui. By eating a lot on the 9th, there's a withdrawal on Yom Kippur, so that increases your inui. But the question would be, I'm just going to leave. We'll just go a little bit more. But the point is, let's say if someone who knows he's going to eat on Yom Kippur, right? Let's say you know you're going to eat on Yom Kippur, so it could be there would not be a mitzvah for you to eat on the 9th of Tishrei, because you're anyway going to eat on Yom Kippur because of a sickness. Who knows? Is that part of it? Next. Okay, let's just finish off the Gemara over here till the Tana Rabban, then we'll stop. Rava said, if you eat a food that's not edible on Yom Kippur, you're not liable. Rava said, Kas pilpula b'yom Kippur. If you chew on a pepper, right, a hot pepper, a Yom Kippur, potter, because that's not an edible food. Kastan givila, if you chew on a piece of ginger, b'yom Kippur, potter, you're not liable, because those are not edible foods. They're just added to another food as a powder. So the Gemara says, basically, you told me that if you eat Yom Kippur pepper, you're potter, you're not liable, because pepper is not a food, it's just a spice. So the Gemara says, but didn't Rameir says, the Torah says that the first 3 years of a fruit tree, you're not supposed to eat it. So the Torah says the fruits of a tree, you're not supposed to eat. Eat it, and it's orla. And then the Torah says, because it's a food tree, it's a tree that gives off food. So why does the Torah have to tell you that if it has fruit on the tree, you should know it's a tree that gives off food? Why does the Torah says eitz machol? It's a tree that gives off food. If you're telling me it has fruit on the tree, certainly it's a tree that's giving off food. So it's coming to be marba something. Eitz, it could be a tree that you wouldn't think it's a tree. Shatab eitzu piri yeshava, that the tree and the fruit taste the same. Heavy oimer zepipulim. The Torah tells you that pepper, right, hot pepper, since the tree, the bark of the tree and the fruit of the tree taste the same, that's called an Isser Arla, and it's an edible fruit that is chayiv an Arla. Pepulim are obligated in the Isser of not eating it the first 3 years. The ain't Eretz Yisrael Chaser Klim. The pasuk says, and it continues there. You should know Eretz Yisrael has every type of fruit and vegetable that we say in davening and in benching. Eretz Chemda Toiva Rechava. Shnema Loy Sechsa Kolba. It's not missing anything. But what do you see from this brisa? That pilpul and peppers are an edible food because hence Arla applies to them. So how did Rava say if you eat pepper on Yom Kippur and hot pepper on Yom Kippur, you're not liable? So the Gemara says, Loy Kasha, it's not difficult. Dry pepper is not edible. That's you put on a food, black pepper. But ha'retifsa, what that rice is talking about, when it's moist, right? It still has wetness to it. Then it is edible, and Arla would apply. One last thing, Amalei Ravina Ramema. Ravina said to Merema, Amar Rav Nachman, but Rav Nachman said, you just tell me that if you eat ginger on Yom Kippur, you're not liable because it's not normally eaten. So wait a second. There was a known food called himalta. Himalta is it comes with spices and ginger and a little honey. They didn't have hechsherim like the OU at the time of Rav Nachman. They knew that these were imported items. The ossi that comes from Mebe Hindu A. I think it comes from India, Hindu A. So, and he said, Sharyeh, don't worry about kosher. It's kosher. Why? Because even if it was cooked in the goyish pots, it's not. There's no bishul akam on there, and there's don't worry about if it's treif because most of the time they're cooking in an old pots. That's what Rav Nachman said. So, but this himalta is made out of ginger, and what does he say? Make a bar pridama. It's an edible food. So the fact that you can eat it raw, because it's eaten raw, but that's why there's no bishul akam over there. So the fact Rav Nachman said such a statement, he must hold that ginger is an edible food and that is eaten raw. So loy kasha, that's not difficult. Ha b'retifsa. If you have wet ginger, yes, I mean we buy ginger all the time, and therefore it's wet. That's an edible food. What we're saying that if you're eating ginger Yom Kippur, it's not edible. That's mahar b'yabeshta. When they took out all the liquid, the moisture inside the ginger, and it's dry powder, that's not an edible food. And this, Rava said, if you eat that on Yom Kippur, kas zangvila, on Yom Kippur, pata, you're not liable. Okay, wow, there was so much to do. I'm sorry I went overtime, but there's no way to accomplish all that.
Yeah, Yeshkoyach, very good.
In 8
Very
days,
good.
and since next week at this time, the Ezra Hashem will make the siyum, and it's it's one amid, so if we'll make it up then. It's only going to be like 15 minutes.
Where did you close off?
So I closed off by the Tanu Rabbanan, about 8 lines from the bottom, 9 lines from the bottom.
What are the next words after Tanu Rabbanan?
Achal ali kanim on the screen. If you eat unedible foods, that's what we're talking about. Eating unedible foods on Yom Kippur.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, Baruch. Sei gesund. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, Mayor.
Shabbos, Yeshkoyach.
Shabbos.